So I recently saw an Instagram post that was saying that the men's English football team was worse than the women's English football team. And this is after the men's team lost the Euro 2024 final, while the women's team won the women's Euros in 2022. And there were even people claiming that the women's team would beat the men's team. And this hit home because I was heartbroken that football didn't come home. And although many of you guys think I'm English, I'm not. But since I like Chelsea and a lot of the Chelsea players play for England, and I also just like the Premier League, it was easy for me to root for England. So yeah, that pissed me off. And since there are many idiots online that make claims like this for other sports, I've decided to make a full video as to why it's a fact that men are better than women at sports. Before I get into the video, I just want to let you know that I have a free community with a free course. So if you're looking to learn more about strength and conditioning, as well as talk to other athletic bodybuilders, be sure to check that out. Before I get into the reasons why men are better than women at sports, I do want to clarify that the point of this video is not to shit on women's sports. Is it funny to shit on women's sports? Yes. Is it the purpose of this video? No. The purpose of this video is to analyze men and women, as well as men and women's sports, to see whether or not men are actually better than women at sports. And of course, we have to start off by looking at the anatomical differences between men and women. And if you're not delusional, you'll obviously know that this benefits men a lot. Men have more muscle mass, less fat, are taller, and have denser, stronger bones, tendons, and ligaments than women. And obviously, all these attributes would heavily benefit men if for some reason men and women were to compete against each other. Being tall would obviously benefit men in basketball, and it would even benefit men in soccer where the ball is played on the ground, as they would have a heavy advantage in aerial duels. I mean, if I was playing soccer against girls, I would be chilling in the box ready to dunk on someone with a header, or even score an overhead kick against a small goalie. I mean, just look how bad this goalie is. If I were the goalie there, it would probably hit me in the chest, and I'm only 5'11". It's so crazy how I'm acting like a freaking beast, but in girls soccer at 5'11", I'd be freaking huge. And when it comes to athletic performance, the easiest way to look at it is look at sprint speed and vertical. Because men have greater leg strength, force, and power, men will be faster and jump higher than women. With jumping high playing a part in soccer for aerial duels like I mentioned earlier, playing a huge part in basketball, and even making a massive difference in a sport like volleyball. And then sprint speed is obviously going to play a part in soccer and basketball. I mean, if I got the ball in either sport, I'd just blow past one of the girls. But you may be wondering, what about sports that don't even require sprinting or jumping? What about MMA? As I said earlier, men are stronger and more powerful than women, which pretty much comes down to them having more muscle mass. So because men are more powerful and stronger than women, they would throw harder punches and kicks, and their takedowns would be far more explosive. So if for some reason these anatomical differences weren't enough for you, let's look at a couple real world examples. Recently, this college player, I think he plays football, was claiming that he would beat Caitlin Clark in basketball, and lots of people were talking about it.
You know, Caitlin's a special player. She's done so much for women's basketball, and I have nothing but respect for her.
Do you think you could beat her?
Yeah. I mean, you don't think I could?
I don't know. I don't.
You don't think I could?
No.
I mean, I used to play basketball.
Oh, shoot, they're running your highlights!
For some reason, there's a debate about whether Caitlin Clark would win this, but in my opinion, she'd get smoked. As we saw, obviously this dude has some skill because he played basketball in high school. I believe he's taller than Caitlin Clark, and he's obviously going to be more athletic as he'll jump higher, he'll sprint faster, and he's stronger. So obviously this dude would beat Caitlin Clark. Another example is Amanda Nunes. Because she pretty much whoops every single girl she fights against, I mean, she's low-key a man, people were claiming that she would beat some of the UFC guys. But Jorge Masvidal, who trains in the same gym as Amanda Nunes, put this stupid question to bed.
How many women do you think it would take for you to be able to lose a fight?
Do you know who Amanda is? Nunes?
Yes.
The greatest women fighter that ever has lived. She was a teammate, good friend of mine for a long time, 7, 8 years. Obviously, we saw what she would do to all the women. And in sparring, she would more or less handle most of the girls. But if we got a guy that was from the UFC, bottom of the barrel, like a 2-on-2 guy, they would have to tell that guy not to go full blast. The speed, the explosiveness to generate the power, and what we can take compared to a woman. I don't mean to sound
agree with you
about the sound, but if the girls don't know what they're doing, the number could be infinite, because I wouldn't get...
No, there's no way. You can't have infinite. They would just smush you.
Masvidal is not knocking on Amanda Nunes' skills, especially when you consider the fact that Amanda Nunes is one of the rare UFC women who actually throw proper punches. He's just saying because she's a woman, she cannot compete with the men. And when it comes to soccer, former Crystal Palace player Wilfried Zaha scrimmaged the female Crystal Palace team and literally just walked through their defense. Zaha is far too quick, far too strong, and far too technical, which I'll talk about later, for these girls to compete with. But what about a non-physical sport? I mean, these soft reporters got mad at this one former tennis player for saying that Serena Williams would not compete with the men tennis players.
She's the greatest player, female player that ever lived. I think you're referring to the fact that I said she'd be about 700 in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Would you like to apologize?
No.
I mean, it's crazy how offended these people got when even Serena Williams claims that she can't compete with the men tennis players.
Andy Murray, he was been joking about myself and him playing a match, and I'm like, Andy, seriously, like, are you kidding me? Because for me, tennis and men's tennis and women's tennis are completely almost two separate sports. So I'm like, if I were to play Andy Murray, I would lose 6-0, 6-0.
So looking at the anatomical differences and these real-world examples, we can see that men are better than women at sports. But another lousy argument that these soft people make is that, oh, the women's sports aren't as physical, but they're more technical than the men. And all you gotta do is look at the UFC female fighters and you know this is false. I mean, you'll have girls like Juliana Pena who have been striking for years, and they strike like this. And if you didn't watch the UFC title fight at UFC 297, you're freaking lucky, because it was so low level, it's crazy. And the crazy thing is that it's a title fight. You expect to see the best fighters in the world, but you see these girls who aren't technical at all. And it's very easy to see this because you'll see a bunch of women's sports fails and they're playing at the highest level and they look like they just started playing. But I typically don't use this argument as it's pretty subjective, and I never thought that you could actually prove that men are more technical than women. But unfortunately for these losers who actually claim that women are more technical than men, there was a 2021 study that compared men and women's football on a technical basis, and they found that men had greater pass accuracy, passed the ball a further distance, and women's recovery time of the ball was lower. So essentially the women weren't able to keep the ball as long, which correlates with lower pass accuracy. The craziest thing is that men had higher pass accuracy even though they passed the ball further. If I passed the ball to you and you're 5 yards away, it'd be really easy for me to get the ball to you. But if I try to pass the ball to you and you're 40 yards away, it'd obviously be much harder for me to place an accurate pass. And if you take into consideration that there will be defenders who are trying to intercept my pass, it makes it even harder. So obviously playing shorter passes is much easier, yet the women were still less accurate. The study even stated in the conclusion that the higher accuracy of passes in men's matches may be due to the higher technical level of male players. So crazily enough, even a study stated that men are more technical. And although this is just soccer, I feel like this would apply to many other sports. Going back to male versus female English football, the manager of the men's team was recently sacked, and there was some talk about the women's English football coach taking over for the men's team. And obviously a lot of people thought that was crazy, but people were claiming that she was not taken seriously because she's a woman. And that's not the case at all. It's because the men and English football games are different sports, which is why comparing them is freaking stupid. I know what you're thinking, well, aren't they both playing football? And yes, that's true, but it's still very different. Former footballer Joey Barton made a very viral statement about female commentators, stating, women shouldn't be talking with any kind of authority in the men's game. Come on, let's be serious. It's a completely different game. If you don't accept that, we will always see things differently. The women's game is thriving, fantastic to see. I cannot take a thing that you say serious in the men's arena. He is right in saying that the men's football game is completely different than the women's. I mean, men are taller, men jump higher, men are faster, and referring back to the study, men keep the ball for longer, they pass the ball faster, they shoot from further out, and they play longer passes. This female coach would suck coaching the men's team, not because she's a woman, but because she coaches the women's football game and it's different than the men's. Going back to what I alluded to earlier, there's recently been discussions that the women's football team is better than the men's football team by feminists because the men's team isn't as successful. And obviously with all the points I've been making, the men's team would whoop the female team. But are the women's team better because they have more success? In my opinion, comparing the two doesn't make any sense because again, the games are very different and the competition is very different. I mean, a lot of the teams that these English women are playing don't even have a full professional team. A lot of the players aren't even professional players. And while for soccer, at least the rules are the same, in other sports like basketball, the rules are literally different, with women playing with a smaller ball and a shorter three-point line. So trying to compare men and women's sports just doesn't make any sense because again, the games are different in not only the way they are played, but in some sports with the rules set. At the end of the day, men and women's sports are different, and that's okay. Are men better than women at sports? Yes. They're not only more physical, but more technical. But like I said earlier, that doesn't really matter because they technically play different games. They're played at a different speed and different intensity. At the end of the day, we should stop comparing men and women's sports. Just make them their own separate thing. You may be saying, oh, you're a hypocrite. You've been comparing men and women's sports this whole video. Well, yes, but that's because there's these feminists online who actually try and compare them, so I had to fight back. Especially when you say that the women's English football team is better than the men's. Being the best best female player in your respective sport like Serena Williams takes as much hard work as being the best men's player in your respective sport like Novak Djokovic, and should both be respected. Will the females get paid as much? No, and I'm not going to get into too much detail about my opinions here, but let's just say it's for the same reasons as to why male models make less than female models. So that's why men are better than women at sports. If you want to learn about the differences between how a bodybuilder and how an athlete trains, I took a deep look in this video.